The memories Kim Lundberg has of his grandfather, affectionately known as Far, consist of the many things Hans collected on his travels and Kim's childhood memories of his visits.
When we came to visit, he'd hand us a handful of pencil crayons, colored pencil crayons, and he'd take us down into the basement. He had these huge walls with magnetometer survey results graphed out on paper. You know, he'd hand me a red one and he said, I want you to fill this one with red, and my brother would get one and he'd do the yellow part.
As children, they were unaware of his impact on the mining industry.
I would say that Lundberg was one of the fathers of geophysics in Canada, but other people who are geochemists may say that he was one of the fathers of geochemistry in Canada.
He actually created the core of people that became the founders of modern exploration geochemistry in Canada.
Hans Lundberg's story began in Sweden.
My grandfather was born at Bullavaken, which is the family home in Lidingö, which is the east island of Stockholm across the bay from the Maid City. He had an early interest in mining. I mean, in 1911, he was making sketches of miners, mines, and mining operations in a little sketchbook. So there's obviously something that fascinated him about mining that was an abiding interest for the rest of his life.
After graduating from the Royal Institute of Technology in Sweden, Hans Lundberg became a lecturer at the institute. While still in his 20s, he and a colleague developed the award-winning equipotential method, which led to the discovery of deposits in Sweden in 1918 and 1922.
The equipotential method that he invented with his colleague was a technique where you would inject current into the ground at a very low frequency, essentially what's known as a direct current technique, and you would measure the potential on the ground and find places where the potential was equal. And by looking at how that potential distorted itself on the surface of the ground, you could work out if there were conductive features underneath.
His acclaim in Sweden attracted attention from the United States.
He came over in, I believe it was 1923, at the behest of a financier in New York. His first contract was for 6 months, and I believe he was offered $125 US per day, which in those days would have been, for some people, a year's salary.
When working for SRCO, he made one of his most important discoveries at Buckens in Newfoundland, where he was one of the first to combine geophysical and geochemical surveys.
They did a survey in a swampy area where there was no obvious geology. No sooner did they dig down below the cover than they found mineralization.
And so they transformed something that had been of interest into what became a very important mine, the largest mine of its kind in Canada at the time. And so that basically sealed his reputation. 1926, he became kind of a rock star overnight.
He also experimented with geobotany, looking for traces of minerals in plants.
He harvested the plants and burned the leaves and extracted gold from what was left, the ash. It didn't amount to a whole lot of gold, but it did work. That was the point of that exercise.
Hans Lundberg operated a successful company in Canada during the 1930s and 40s, working on over 40 projects across Canada. But he may be best known for his work with airborne geophysical surveys using helicopters and fixed-wing aircraft, and working with his son, Sten, a World War II pilot.
He was one of the first people in Canada to buy a helicopter. He and his son would go out and collect the geophysical data. One of the first instruments that they put on the helicopter was a magnetometer, and he used that to collect aeromagnetic data.
He didn't limit his efforts to mining. He gained recognition for using his technology in unusual ways. One was offering to help an oil company survey for petroleum.
He said, if it's successful, if I help you find oil, you give me an oil well. And apparently that well produced something like $25,000 a month for years. And so that was his way of getting paid.
He also gained recognition for finding prehistoric bones in Mexico and an ore body in a crater in Arizona. Some say Hans Lundberg was a man on the forefront of the industry, as evident in a talk from 1948.
He talks about 3D visualization of the Earth. He talks about using aerial surveys in all manner of ways to obtain information about the near surface and the subsurface. He jumped ahead 40 to 50 years in that talk. And you'd look at it and you'd say, where did he get that information? There was nothing existed like that. And he predicted all of this just out of the blue.
It's not just his discoveries, but Lundberg's willingness to share his vision, findings, and technology that have made him an important figure in the history of geophysics in Canada.